Welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Morning Show. It is Solidarity Wednesdays, and on Wednesdays, Solidarity Wednesdays, we connect with our sister from another Mr. Nomiki Kantz. We'll be speaking with her momentarily. DJ Exclusive is with me as always. Good morning to him. DJ Exclusive, who helps us maintain and bring the joy along the way. Good morning to you, brother. And we'll be joined also momentarily by Dr. Carl Mack, Georgia Fort, the entire team. Rebecca Zor will be coming in. I want to begin, as always, on Solidarity Wednesdays with Nomiki of the Nomiki Show. Nomiki, thank you so much for joining us this morning. How goes the day?
Good morning. Wow, look at that view. I'm loving that.
Yeah, I said, I'm a country boy at heart. I've been pretending to be a northerner for a while, but I said, let me just show the real part of me. Thank you so much for joining us on Wednesdays as always, and I'll be with you later on today, connecting the dots between movements, between subsets of a movement. We all are fighting for the liberation of all people. We are fighting for progress. We're fighting for people to have everything they need in order to be fully functioning, contributing citizens of this society. But yet and still, it seems sometimes these efforts that we have are scuttled by not just by the obvious players, but just at every turn. Why is solidarity so difficult in these days?
Oh, that's the $1 question, I could say. I think it is in our instincts as humans to want to be together. And when you don't have a unifying force, Bernie Sanders, for a good part of the movement, was able to unite many on the left. Now, I think since Bernie Sanders, we've actually brought more into our circle. So it'd be really interesting to kind of see who didn't support Bernie Sanders in 2016 or 2020 does support the policies that he was fighting for and that we've joined hands with on other fights since then, and maybe even before 2020. But with that being said, there's a lot of dysfunction as usual on the left. Some of it is because there's a lot of young people who may not have been through a few rounds of this before, who may not know history, don't know what to look for. And I think it's really important, to read your history because, there are often things that the left can get into, different fights that aren't necessarily priorities, keeping your eye on the prize. That's why leaders are really important. People who say we shouldn't have leaders in a movement, I don't disagree with that because, if you're a strong leader, you're setting a vision and you're reminding people what it's about at every single day, because we do as humans get caught up in bickering and fighting over maybe issues that are not top tier issues or interpersonal drama or just releasing our frustrations. And then the big one, right. I hate to bury the lead, is the opposition wants to divide us. So sometimes they will place those issues in front of us and see that, we as humans are tempted to get into scuffles over, non-priorities. I mean, just go on Twitter any day of the week, any moment of the day, or YouTube, and you'll see that there's a lot of supposed leftist hosts on YouTube, no, it's not the whole movement, who aren't talking about issues, aren't talking about organizing, but they're talking about each other. It's not, right. I mean, sometimes you got to do it to debunk stuff, but, if your entire show is built off of going after someone who's really contributing, maybe you don't agree with them on everything, but if they're not getting in your way or getting in the movement's way in any form, why do you gotta say like they're fake or whatever these shows do? And that's what I really like about your shows. You're presenting solutions.
Well, we try to present solutions as much as we can. We had DJ Exclusive was on mute when I was saying good morning to him. I definitely want to bring my brother in to the conversation. And I do believe we also have Dr. Carl Mack, who is going to join the conversation. So good morning all the way around the board. Nomiki, I know you know the rest of the team. Good morning, everyone.
Morning, everyone.
Good morning, y'all. Good morning, Nomiki.
Good morning.
This is the thing, and I want to move because we're going to jump from this to Kiev, right? We're going to go from here to there because one of the things that you said that I think I try to alarm people of on a regular basis is that the opposition is extremely organized. And when I say opposition, I'm not just talking about Russia, Putin. I'm talking about January 6th. I'm talking about not just the issues that are happening on Twitter and these things that seem to be so niche, but we're talking about people who are really organized, the 3%ers, the Oath Keepers, the list of militia groups who are in the streets every single day, prepared for, I guess, a second civil war. So really briefly, talk about how organized the opposition is.
That's for me?
Yeah, that's for you.
I mean, they got the money, right? So, you know, it's like, what flavor of white supremacist are you? I don't even know the difference between Oath Keeper and the January 6th riots, but you see that even they get like testy about their differences. But at the end of the day, it's about capital, and capital is oppressive to the most marginalized people, really to all working people. But of course, you know, it affects the most marginalized people first and foremost. And so they're going to do whatever it takes, whether it's, you know, looking the other way or, you know, condemning violence. But not actively doing anything to stop these groups from organizing. They're terrorist groups. You know, I love how Republicans, Mitch McConnell, all these guys are such patriots and talk about terrorism abroad and condemning all these attacks and expanding the military budget. And then when, you know, conflicts end, or you know, they want to cycle out a new set of weapons, where do those weapons go? They come back home and they go into, and soldiers, not just weapons, soldiers come back home and they join the police force. And so we have a militarized police force here in this country, not to mention several veterans who you know, have gone through so much and have no support, barely any support in this country. And we have folks who play video games all day. And I know this is controversial, but a lot of these video games are funded by the U.S. military or some sort of military industry related project.
That's right.
And they're training people to be violent, but against who? Right. You know, who? That's the question. If they're online and they're reading all these channels, you know, they're going to use and channel it against, you know, not the government, not against, you know, capital. It's being targeted. That's why you're seeing a rise in white supremacy. But, you know, this is where the Democrats need to start pushing back harder. I mean, it's not just about voting rates, extremely important. It is about pushing back and saying, why aren't you investigating not just the January 6th riots, but why aren't you investigating the funding chain? And why aren't you investigating these terrorist units before it becomes a problem? Because they are terrorist units. That's right.
That's right. Absolutely. Dr. Carl Mack is on the screen with us now. Good morning to you, Dr. Mack. It's good to have you back riding in the seat. We're talking about January 6th and how organized these groups are. And we're juxtaposing it, quite honestly, with how difficult it is to get that level of organization in many sides. You know, it's not any one group in particular, but it's just difficult. Getting solidarity, organizing is difficult. But it seems like when we look at how organized January 6th was, when we look at how organized the propaganda machine of Vladimir Putin is here in the United States, we have to take a moment and realize that our opposition is extremely organized.
Good morning, Brother Dixon, Sister Nomiki, and Bubba. Good morning to you all. Nomiki, you know, when you were speaking of the efforts, to me, it's quite simple. If this country truly cared at the forefront of what it tries to represent, and that is the greatest demonstration of democracy ever, it is impossible not to know that democracy as we know it is being challenged by these groups. So it just comes down to a commitment. So it's very hard for me to believe that those members in Congress who swore an oath to protect the Constitution, to protect democracy, does not see that as a threat. And so I would not call them patriots. I would literally call them cowards, which is what they're doing. The Democratic Party, you know, it's one thing to play politics, but when one speaks about the love of this country and to know that these groups have been able to do what they represented on January 6th. See, those same types of efforts we've seen time and time again, and when they affected the African American community, in particular, when we became free, when slavery ended, we saw the advent of the Ku Klux Klan starting in Pulaski, Tennessee on December 24th, 1865. We've seen as recently as the burning of Black churches, the threatening of recently historical Black colleges and universities. So see, when it was just happening to the African-American community, of course, no one cared about it. But now they're watching their blind eye turn against the very thing that this country thinks that it most treasures, and that is democracy. And then the biggest insult to what they are doing is that America has always prided itself on a peaceful transfer of power. And that got wiped out on January 6th. And these same folks who sit in the halls of democracy saying how much they care more about this country, even over party, over politics, are clearly demonstrating to us that that doesn't matter.
Dwayne, I want to go to C1 really quick. I know that's in the different segment, but this is as good a place as any. The White House records turned over to the House of Representatives show a 7-hour gap in the Trump phone log on January 6th. I want to read a little bit from this and get everyone's thoughts on this. The internal White House records from the day of the attack, and this is according to CBS News, the U.S. Capitol that were turned over to the House Select Committee shows a gap in President Donald Trump's phone logs of 7 hours and 37 minutes, including the period when the building was being violently assaulted, according to documents obtained by CBS's news chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa and the Washington Post associate editor Bob Woodward. Now, we could talk about the underlying issue of these journalists having this kind of information and holding it until they can release a book. We've had that precedent before. We'll set that aside for a moment. This is beyond problematic. No, Miki, this should be criminal. Talk about this for a second.
I mean, I'm not an election lawyer, but I seriously am considering going back to law school after this experience. Listen, I think that, there's that old saying about Washington that, the frog's boiled and they don't even realize when they've been boiled, the old saying. I think that's what's happening to our democracy. I think that we have become so numb to these stories that we don't realize each and every one of them are so incredibly significant that if they had been reported 10, 15 years ago, it would be on the news all day long. I'm not even going to say like Obama era. I mean, if Obama did it, of course, they would never shut up about it. They'd have hearings about it, ad nauseum if Hillary did it. But what Dr. Beck says is true. I mean, this is democracy falling apart. And I can only look to, honestly, I can only look to Russia at this point because there are plenty of oligarchs in this country. But I also think that capital is always going to look for the safest model. And we have a stable democracy. And part of the reason why, and whether you agree with it or not, I'm not necessarily agreeing with it, but part of the reason why U.S. imperialism in its modern form is about liberal democracies, expanding liberal democracies. Let's be honest. It is the conditions are more ripe for capital for companies to invest in those countries once there's a stable democracy. And so I can't actually see this being something, the falling apart of our democracy being good for our country and frankly, any other country's democracy and good for capital. I can only see this being good for Putin's interests. And I'm sorry that's so simplistic, but Republicans need to start thinking about this too. If their bottom line is the bottom line, then they got to think, what happens if we have no more democracy? People aren't going to feel safe it's not safe to invest anymore. These, it's just, the conditions aren't, it's not peaceful and never peaceful, but if it's barely peaceful, then what comes next?
And no, Mickey and Ben, one of the things that I have to try to get your opinion on, Bubba, as well. A sitting U.S. Supreme Court justice's wife is somehow. Yes. When we talk about a respect, a protection of democracy, the highest court in the land, you have a U.S. Supreme Court justice whose wife somehow is tied to this. Nomiki, Ben, Bubba, please help a brother out because I am on the deepest end of perplexity, confusion here.
Absolutely, Dr. Mack.
Listen, I haven't hit that story as closely as I should, but I do know that I almost said Carl Thomas's wife, not Carl Thomas. It's Clarence. Clarence Thomas's wife has been an extreme right conservative activist for a very long time. And it's a shame that it has taken something this extreme for there to be any accountability. But she has been a problem. And for you to have, let's just be real. One of the most powerful men in the world, Clarence Thomas, to have his wife in a position to be doing the things that she was doing is anathema, to be true, honestly.
But we're talking about the things around January 6th. So, Nomiki, if you could speak to that, I'd certainly like to hear your perspective about it. And by the way, her name is Virginia, so let's put it out there, right?
All I can say, I don't know. I mean, these are unprecedented times. So where do we go from here? Will this escalate? Will there be hearings? Will he have? I mean, he's recused himself from January 6th related cases, but it's like, he's barely proven himself to begin with as being somebody who comes in with good faith, and I think a good chunk of America has seen that. I want to go back and watch those hearings. I want to go back and see. I mean, we know that they were controversial hearings, especially over his relations with women. But aside from that, I want to know how we vetted this man. And he got into office before this new wave, or got into his position before this new wave of conservatism took over America. Exactly.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
I mean, it would be interesting just to watch all the hearings of all of, put them on some show like C-SPAN or something. Because, it's almost like we need to do an audit of how did we get here? How did we get here?
Well, I can tell you clearly in the case of in the case of Clarence Thomas, it was certainly on the backs of a very brave sister, Anita Hill. And I think when we go back and take a look at how Clarence Thomas got through the Senate confirmations, I think what I remember most during that time is how proud I was that Anita Hill spoke truth to power, had the courage to sit before a bevy of folks and backlash and talking about the background of a man who it's almost sinful and shameful that you have Clarence Thomas to replace the great Thurgood Marshall. But again, what bothers me most is in the position he sits as a U.S. Supreme Court justice. It is asinine for me to think that we are hearing stories about his wife having any sorts of ties to what happened on January 6th. Right. It's an abomination.
That's right. No, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to give us one more abomination before we get out of here for this first segment. This story bothers me, and I don't know, maybe there's a legitimate justification for it. I'm going to go to X0. This is the U.S. and Mexico reaching a secret deal on Russian refugees. Now, the reason this is bothering me is because of the nature of how so many Black refugees have been treated at the border. Specifically Haitian refugees. So we're certainly going to be talking about this later on with Rebecca Azor. But this is according to Vice News. The U.S. admitted a group of Russians at the border under secret deal with Mexico. A group of Russian citizens who fled their country after the invasion of Ukraine and spent a week camped out of the U.S.-Mexico border was quietly admitted into the U.S. in a secret deal with Mexican officials, according to Vice World News. The group of 35 asylum seekers were whisked away in a pre-dawn. They were whisked away pre-dawn hours of March 20th and driven to a part of the border where they wouldn't be seen, a checkpoint that has been closed to the public for several months. There, under cover of night, Mexican immigration officers handed the Russians over to the U.S. Customs and Border Protection. 2 days before, the Russians had received an offer from a Russian-speaking man who introduced himself as an American diplomat. They would be taken across the border, but only if they broke up their growing encampment in the busy pedestrian crossing between Tijuana and San Diego. There's a lot more to the story, but I want to pause there. Also in the story is the fact that these asylum seekers were brought in despite Title 42, right? Despite every reason that Haitian asylum seekers were turned away and deported. Nomiki, jump in there real quick.
My jaw it dropped.
Right.
I don't know what justification. I'm trying to think of something. Like, is there a deal? I can't come up with anything. I mean, this is just flat out racism. It's just out there. We saw how the Border Patrol treated the Haitian refugees. We see how those encampments have not gone away. I mean, they're slowly, as they say, they're slowly, I guess, reforming the encampments. I don't know, making them more humane. But how do we know? I mean, credit to Vice, because that's not an easy story to cover, and I think they've done a great job there. But I love to hear what the government's response is. Is this some sort of secret espionage thing? I have no idea. Dr. Mack, I have no idea.
I was about to say, but do we even think that we'll hear a response, though? That's the real thing. We probably won't even hear anything.
They'll send Kamala out, because they send her out to answer all the tough questions and then blame her.
Oh, my gosh, no, Mickey.
No, Mickey, that is exactly where I'm going now.
Yes.
Had this story broken and negative 44 was in the Oval Office, we'd go par for the course. That's what we would expect. With Biden in the White House, and Sister Kamala Harris in the White House, trust and believe, sister, we want to know front line and center right now. You must address this report, because it is so easy, Sister Nomiki, as you said, in the case of the way that we've seen Black immigrants being treated on horseback, being whipped. We saw that.
That's right.
Now, I need to understand, Madam Vice President, please explain this to, well, no, not please. Damn it, explain this shit to us.
Come on, somebody. Come on. Let me read a little bit more if I can make the situation worse. The next paragraph, I think, was probably the most important paragraph from Vice.com. The secret agreement brokered by the U.S. consulate in Tijuana and executed in conjunction with Mexican officials at the federal and state levels bypassed Title 42, the controversial pandemic-era measure that allows U.S. border authorities to expel or deny entry to asylum seekers without hearing their claims. The policy has left tens of thousands of migrants stranded at the Mexican side of the border, as we discussed. As captured by Vice World News cameras and independently confirmed by 3 sources, including a Mexican federal official, the incident reveals how asylum policy under Title 42 is not a system of predictable or transparent rules. I'm, of course not, but rather one of arbitrary special exemptions and backdoor deals. Yeah. You think?
I'm done.
Yeah, we're all just...
Bubba, I'm going to tell you right now, I need to leave this scene and I need to go swim tomorrow.
I tell you, no, Miki, I tell you what, let's do this. Since we have 2 more minutes. This story is a little triggering. Let's move on from this story and we'll come back to it later on today. The last story I wanted to get your thoughts on, Naomi, before you left, was Russia claiming to scale back their Kiev defensive or rather offensive. And Russia is reducing military activity near Kiev during peace talks. And the peace talks from Zelensky seem to now be talking about declarations of neutrality. In the pull and push between Russia and NATO, Zelensky is floating neutrality. I don't know how much you've been following the story, but I'd like to know your thoughts about what's happening in the developments.
I mean, if this is what it's about, Ukraine being neutral, and then it's pretty clear that that's what Putin has always cared about is Ukraine being right there and potentially joining NATO, and NATO being right up against Russia. I don't buy it. Even if Ukraine were to be neutral, give it a couple of years and they'll be back. I just don't buy it. I'm sorry.
And Ben, I just want to say that when we talk about neutrality, again, I just want to be clear so that all of us understand neutrality in this case is that Ukraine would not become a member of NATO, which is what Putin has said was always his issue. So when we speak of neutrality, that is exactly what we're saying. And Nomiki, I have to absolutely agree with you that if that's what it takes to end this situation, yeah, but trust and believe, a couple of years down the road, Ukraine is going to do it. And I think what we have to remember is that Ukraine was once in a position that Putin wouldn't have dared to do this. And that was when Ukraine had the third largest stockpile of nuclear weapons on the planet. So you best believe if Ukraine still had those nuclear weapons and they gave them up with assurances that if anything should happen, that NATO would come to their defense. So if I'm Ukraine, I'm feeling some kind of way right now. You know, in the streets, I'm feeling punked right now. That, look, man, I had all that I needed to protect me, and I gave it up in the sense of world peace. You gave me assurances that you had my back. And fool, when we were in the club scene and the fight broke out, I'm looking for you to have my back, and you the first one I see running through the door, running out away from me. So Ukraine should feel some kind of way about this situation right now, given what it had to protect itself. And like I said, trust and believe, had they still had that arsenal of nuclear weapons, Putin wouldn't have come close to doing what he's doing right.
I agree. Listen, we're going to take it to a break. Nomiki, do me a favor. Tell everybody how they can get more of Solidarity Wednesdays by coming to see your show.
The Nomiki Show, it's on Twitch, it's on YouTube, it's on podcast. So if you go to patreon.com/The Nomiki Show and you want to support, there's all the levels there. We have swag.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Mac, DJ Exclusive, let's take it to a break. We'll be back with more of the Benjamin Dixon Morning Show right after this.